So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the August edition of the Past Women in Tech virtual group meeting, where our motto is encourage, energize, and empower. I want to encourage all of you here on the meeting today, men and women, to find a mentor and be a mentor specifically to women. Sponsor women at work. Studies show that women who are sponsored, who have their work highlighted by somebody else, are not only more successful in IT, but stay in IT longer. And I don't know if you know, there's already a shortage. So help us out a little. The Past Women in Tech group has two sponsors. It is an embarrassment of riches. Century One and Redgate have both been amazing to the women in tech community that PASS has helped build, and we really, really appreciate what they give back to us. One of the things that they give back today will be gift cards to two individuals on the meeting. So the email that you've registered at is how I will get in touch with you later. You can check us out on YouTube. Please don't try to memorize that that URL. You just go search for PassWit on YouTube. This session will be uploaded hopefully close of business today. You can check out our homepage, wit.pass.org. There we list all of the links for upcoming meetings. We have the links for past meetings, and you ought to be able to get to the videos through there as well. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at PassWit, and follow and use the hashtag PassWit whenever you want to share information with a larger organization. A lot of us actually follow that hashtag. Let's see, we have coming up in the next few weeks a lot of women speaking at SQL Saturdays. I'm incredibly pleased at the efforts organizers are making to make sure that they have women on their schedules. So we have Lima, Victoria, Providence, Singapore, Oslo, Johannesburg, and next month we have Mala speaking. She's doing SQL Graph for us, but today we have Christina Wheeler. I met her. Did I meet you at MVP Summit, Christina? Is that where we first met? No, or did I? Yeah.
Not sure, man. I blend all everything together so much.
Christina is a Microsoft MVP, just like I was until I made the transition earlier this month to being a Blue Badge. And so she presented this at SQL Saturday Atlanta. It was very, very well received. We had this session lead straight into Patrick and Adam's deeper session on PowerApps.
So amazing, by the way.
I'm
Those
sorry?
two guys are so fun to watch. They had amazing presentations.
They are absolutely amazing. So I'm glad. I would never ever want to present right after them.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So yours was just it was a perfect fit to go right before theirs. So I was really pleased that all three of you agreed to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you. Attendees, if you have questions as we go, feel free to type them right there into the question box, and I will do what I can to get Christina to answer those. And I do not want your keyboard and mouse control, so it is all yours. Oh, Christina, I will also be muted unless I need to unmute to ask you a question.
Great, sounds good. Welcome, everybody. I'm just turning my camera on just to say a quick hello, but then I'm going to shut it off. I hope you guys are all dog lovers, because if you're not, I'm sorry. I do have two dogs that are in the living room. Gave them some bones, some rawhides to chew on to kind of keep them occupied, so we'll see how long that lasts. I'm actually working from home this week, and now I get on a plane starting Friday. But let me get my camera off, and we'll go from there. Okay. Nope,
now you're just camera.
Oh, shoot. Christina Marie, come on. Wrong button. There we go. So I got to stop working until, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so my session is on an introduction to PowerApps, and I'll give you a little bit of my background. I am a solution architect, and as Reese said, I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been in this industry for a very long time. My background goes both technical and designer. I'm an old school developer. I started in computers since I was really young, started programming when I was young. Got thrown into SharePoint at the very beginning of the product, been in it ever since. Have an old BI data, database and data warehouse background, business objects, business intelligence. I was a SQL DBA for a while. I love SQL Server, I love data. And so when Power BI came out, I was just in heaven. And then PowerApps came out too, and I'm like, ooh, okay, what is this? Then I started teaching PowerApps when it was a beta, and I've been involved in it ever since. Oh, I have a new blog site, by the way. I updated my URL. So no more SharePoint because I do everything, you know, I do everything. But if you were to pull up my email, my old web address, it should still redirect. Okay, so I do training for critical path training. We specialize in Power BI and PowerApps and Flow training. So if you're interested in more training courses, just go to criticalpathtraining.com and you can see what classes we have available. We do public classes. We started doing some one-day classes as well, because we do understand it's hard for a lot of people to get away for a number of days. And if you're interested in private classes, we do those also. Alrighty, so my dogs in the background. Left, you got Hank. He's my thorn in my side that I love with all my heart. And of course, the middle one, that's my poor baby that I just lost in January unexpectedly to cancer. And then my new rescue, who is a horse, AKA Kona, German Shepherd, Staffordshire mix. He's my new baby. And believe it or not, actually, I should put another picture up where he started out really tiny. And now he's 8. I think this picture, he was 6 months old. So you can imagine how big he's getting. And so if you hear any dogs barking in the background, you're going to know who the two are. Okay, so this is an introductory to PowerApps. I'm going to give you an introduction. One of the things is PowerApps is not, it's no longer new, right? Before, when I would do this presentation, a lot of people haven't even heard what PowerApps is. By now, most of you should have heard or may have already started working with PowerApps. Now, I love PowerApps, but I'm not going to lie to you. I had a lot of frustrations in the beginning. But I also came from the beta world, or teaching a beta class when it was, very beginning of the product. So, but the plus side of me starting in the very beginning of the product is being able to see the transition the product group has made and the improvements and just seeing this product grow. Now, PowerApps is a service, just like all other products you have in Office 365. You have all those, different products that are a service. And I guess I could turn my camera on because I'm looking at you guys like, I'm looking at the camera like you can see me. Okay, here we go. So there's 2 different types of PowerApps you can create. You have Canvas apps, and when PowerApps started, that was the only option you had. You would create Canvas apps, and you would create, oh, I'm missing my image. My image disappeared. Woohoo! That's okay. I'll fix that. Oh, yeah, look at it. Did you see that? Okay, so here we go. So we've got, that's nice. Oh, there we go. I was hacking up my slides, so I kind of messed up a little. But you have Canvas apps and you have model-driven apps. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I've only taught model-driven apps, but I haven't built any production model-driven apps for any of my customers yet because all of them were not on until some changes come into place. They were on the licenses that will only give you Canvas apps. So that's kind of my wheelhouse and where my experience is at the moment. The demos I'm going to show you today are Canvas app driven, not model driven, but there's a lot of great resources online and a lot of free content and tutorials and things that Microsoft has posted out there on model driven apps. One of the things I recommend too, and I always have to search for this because I forget, I should memorize this, but you have your tenant, and Ree, maybe you can help me out with this. There's the community PowerApps. It's free. Is this, oh yeah, community plan, here we go. So if you're getting started with PowerApps, and let's say you don't have an environment, Well, even if you do have an environment, chances are your environment is your work environment. What I recommend you do is actually go ahead and sign up for a free environment under the PowerApps community plan. And this will give you the opportunity just to have a little sandbox environment so you can start learning, playing around, and then you don't have to worry about messing anything up in your production environment. And so this, I think, is great. I think there's only one thing you cannot do, which I believe is share apps, but it should give you, now it's been a while since I've logged in to my community plan because I have a lot of tenants based on what I do. So I have not tested this lately to see, if anything's changed, but it should give you everything, including the common data service. So you should be able to build both model-driven and Canvas apps in this tenant. And I think I forgot to include this in my slides. So what I'll do, is when I'll update my slides, give them to you so that way we can distribute it out or have it as a link to the video when it gets posted. But that's what I recommend that you download.
I'm also about to tweet that link, so it should, perfect. They can just look on Twitter.
Now, if you guys hear me stumble a little, it's because I'm really hungry. I scarfed some food, but not enough. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, I'm going to focus on some of the Canvas apps and do a demo on that. But like I said, you've got your Canvas and you have your model-driven apps. And one of the things you can do too is create standalone Canvas. So I do standalone Canvas apps and I build apps against a SharePoint list to become my PowerApp custom view within a SharePoint list. So one of the things that you can do is you can create a PowerApp as a standalone app against a SharePoint list, and you can also use it to customize the forms. So in the past, you had info paths that would be used to create your custom new, edit, and display form in SharePoint against a SharePoint list. With Modern, if you are in Modern, and you can even, let's say your site collection is in Classic, but you have Modern List and Libraries enabled. If you have that enabled, you will have this option in your dropdown for your list where you can go and create, like I said, a standalone app or a customized form. Now you do have the capability to build PowerApps against on-prem SharePoint. If you do that, that's just going to be a standalone app, and it does require you to have the on-prem data gateway that is also used for Power BI and Flow. So by default, if you start with being in your SharePoint list and you click on create an app, what that's going to do is going to generate a standalone app that's going to default to giving you 3 screens. Now you can also start with other data, where I might decide in PowerApps I start with SQL data, SQL Azure data. If I do that, when you're starting from data in a PowerApp, it will automatically generate the screens for you based on that data connection that you have. Well, in this case, my data connection is SharePoint, but like I said, you can also have your data connection with SQL or other data sources. So you customize your screens based upon your needs, and not all columns are supported, and I need to actually figure out what the updates are on that one. But here is an example here where I have a list called supply orders. Ignore some of the I've noticed there's no space on this one, but space is on this one. I got 3 forms generated. I have a browse screen, which is going to basically have all my data that's in my data source. Then I'm going to have a detail screen, and the detail screen is just going to be read-only, where the user will see the screen. And then I have the edit screen, where it'll take me into edit mode. These screenshots that I have here on that I'm displaying to you are what you have out of the box. This is where I did 0 customizations. I started with my data source, created the screens, and this is how it started. Now, I'm a big UI person. I have a graphic design background, so I'm a stickler when it comes to design. I will tell you, I'm going to show you a demo and show you how you can modify things. There are some frustrations I have dealt with because I am used to, I came from Dreamweaver background, I came from raw HTML background, I came from being able to, easily do my elements in code in HTML markup and things like that. So when I started working with PowerApps, it was a little bit of a challenge because I realized it was not as easy for me to manipulate these controls. But this is where practice came into place. And the more I got involved with PowerApps, the more I realized the little quirky things that I needed to do. And so now I'm having a blast. So there's ways around the UI. Now, for example, here I've got the browse screen. And what you're going to end up having is also controls that are going to be auto-generated for you. And in this case, I have a refresh button, I have a sort order button, and then I have a plus button, which these are all image controls. So it's an automatically generated image, which is also available to you in the ribbon to add additional ones, or you can delete these and replace them with something else. So, but what it'll be is an image control that will have a formula against it, so that if I click on it, it does something. Then here you have the browse gallery. This is a gallery control that is tied to my data source, and this can be modified. And I'll end up showing you a demo where I made a lot of modifications. Then if I click into a record, say I click on Jones, it's going to take me to this next screen where I can see my actual record. I can see all the fields that I decided to display in the screen for the user. And on the top here, you're going to see I have more image controls. So I have a back button, I have a trash icon, and then I have a pencil to edit. Now this is also, so then I've got my form here, which is data connected. Then if I click on the pencil icon, that of course takes the user to be able to edit the record. And like I said, this is tied to a SharePoint list, but I could have this tied to other types of data sources. Then you see I have a difference in controls here. I have an X to cancel, and then I have my checkbox to actually save. Now, I like the checkboxes. Some of my customers have been wanting a save icon, like the disk, which I've been adding as well. Just depends on what you want to have there for your users. And then you'll see I have my controls here. Now, what'll happen too is when you're working with this, it's going to default to spanning your fields to full screen. And of course, this is a phone layout, but if I had it in a tablet or other type of layout, of course, it would be wider. So I also make modifications to my UI to make it a little bit different. So what I end up doing is changing my form layout. So you have form layout options in PowerApps, and by default, let me launch Zoom it. I think I have it on here. I don't use this. I swap between multiple computers. There we go. So did that open? Yes, it did. Okay, let's go back to here. So you have your form layout, and the form layout will give you options, and it defaults to vertical, where what happens is when it's vertical, your label is on top of the form control, and then your control is down below it. Then you also have the option to change it to horizontal, where your labels are on the left. I'll tell you, I rarely or ever, I've never done it horizontal. I've played around with it and realized I didn't like how it was for the forms I was working on. So most of the time I end up just having it as vertical, but that's the default. And then you can start making more changes. Another thing you have is the columns. You can decide how many columns you want it to be. And of course, with the phone layout, it's going to default to 1 column, and with a tablet layout, it'll default to 3, which you can change. So all that is something that you can modify. Then what you're going to have is card controls. So what the card controls is, it's your data cards. You have card controls and data cards, and these get auto-generated based on your data source. Now you can start an app as a blank canvas app. Let's just go, oops, sorry, let's go here. So I'm in, the demo I'm going to show you is a customer demo, which I had got permission to show, so I just want to let you guys know. So I always forget which one it is because I go back and forth between PowerApps and Power BI, but it is, okay, so now it's make.powerapps.com. So I'm in the service, and when I'm in the service here, you're going to see I have options. Let me go and hide my So you've got different options here, and one of them I haven't even dove into the portal stuff yet, but Canvas app and model driven. Now I can do it from blank, but I can also start from data. Now another thing you have is the common data service, and the common data service you'll see is available here in my left menu. And this is, you can create custom entities. Now I only have until 1 o'clock, so I'm not going to dive into this, but this is where you'll get heavily involved in CDS, especially if you're working on model-driven apps. And then let me go ahead and click on apps.
Quickly, Christina, let me interrupt you. I have, can you link to a Power Pivot data model? Is that possible?
You can connect to, yes, you can connect to, you can pull Excel data. So what it is it will do an import. You have various data connections that you can do, and so Excel is one of them. I happen to do more with SQL and other stuff. Yes, you can pull in data from
okay,
Excel.
thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to go and click and create. When I click on create, you're going to see I have a bunch of options here. Now the top is going to be the most, the things provided by Microsoft starting from scratch. And then scrolling down the bottom, you're going to see a lot of templates. Now, what I recommend, especially for those that are new, what I started doing when I first was learning PowerApps, I went in and started previewing these pre-built apps here that Microsoft has published. So let's go to the asset checkout. Before I do that, let's go ahead and do this. So I'll click on asset checkout. And when I click on this, it's going to take me to another screen. And one of the things you'll see here is I know it's a Canvas app because I see Canvas app there. Then you're going to see that I have 2 different formats I can choose from. Now, some of the tablets might be tablet only, some might be phone only. And then in this case, I have the choice to do tablet or phone. So I'll just go ahead and give my app a name. I'll do asset checkout demo. I'll make this tablet, and then I'll click create. So now it's going to go ahead and create the Power App and then open up PowerApps Studio. So the reason why I like working, why I started out originally with the templates was so I can actually see some pre-built Power Apps to, one, see how the screens are set up, see what controls there are, and start diving into the formulas to figure out, to basically learn the different formulas and so on. So here I went ahead and auto-generated one. Now this one is just, or I could preview it here. You're going to see an option here to make it my own app. And what it is that in this case, this is, when you create these apps, and speaking of the question on the Power Pivot, well, this is not going to be Power Pivot data, but if I go ahead and make this my own app, the data is actually going to be stored in an Excel file. And what will happen is it's going to store it in OneDrive. So if I click to make my own app, it defaults, the text at the top says, well, it says such as OneDrive. So I just need a location to store my actual data for this app. And what you're going to see here is a bunch of options here, which is great. One of the things I love about Microsoft now on the cloud focus and everything else is how everything's becoming, we're able to work with all these different environments now. You're not just, you've got customers that use Box, some that use Dropbox, some use Google Drive, and then of course OneDrive. So we've got all these different options now to be able to tie into different systems that are not just Microsoft. But I'm going to go here and I'm just going to go ahead and do OneDrive for Business. And I'll do OneDrive for Business and I'll click on it. It's going to add my connection. And what it's basically going to do is going to create a folder in my OneDrive and create all the files it needs for this Power App for my data store. Now I'm having another prompt here saying I have unsaved data. I want to go ahead and save my progress. I'm going to save my progress, and this is where I'm going to update the name of my app. Let's go ahead and call it that. And then I have 2 options here as well. I can decide to save it to the cloud, or I can save it to my computer. With as much as I travel and so on, I have the habit of saving my stuff to the cloud now. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then it's saved. Now here's my backstage, or let's just still call it backstage, right? In Office, you have your backstage. This is where I have all my settings. And now I have an option here to share the app or see all versions. I also have, let's go to app settings. I'm going to go to app settings. And if I go to app settings, this is where you're going to have other features or other things for your app, properties that you could change for your PowerApp. And because this is a standalone PowerApp, and I did not do it as a SharePoint custom view, I do have the capability to change my app name, change the icon, the color, change the description here for my PowerApp. The other thing I can do is go to screen size and orientation. Now, I created this PowerApp off that template. And when I created it off the template, you saw that I chose tablet when I went to open up the PowerApp. So what it did was it went ahead and set it as tablet. And the tablet default's going to be an iPad size here, the 4:3. Well, I could decide I want to do an aspect ratio of the Surface Pro or maybe 16:9. But you'd have the options to choose here what format you want it to be. And then you can also do custom. One of the recommendations I do have is when you're starting with your PowerApp, determine the size you want it to be from the beginning. And I'm saying that only from experience because I would create a PowerApp, I would tweak my controls, and then decide to change this size here. And if I go from a drastic size, I would have it where my controls would all of a sudden kind of get out of whack and how I want it displayed. And then I had to start over with just the formatting of everything. So unless something's changed, because there might be some people on this call here in the community that's all their heads down in PowerApps. Like I mentioned before, I cross the whole stack. So I can go 6 months on PowerApps and then months on Power BI and so on. So I don't get to stay up to date as much as my other colleagues that are working on it every day. But that's my recommendation, and I'm saying that based on experience. Then you have the default scale to fit, lock aspect ratio, and lock orientation. These are all stuff too that was started in the beginning, but I am also starting to see people out in the community that are building responsive PowerApps. And Brian Dang at Microsoft, I love him dearly. He started, he might even have some videos out there, but I know that like the product group is working on implementing more and more features into PowerApps. And one of the things Brian started doing before all these other improvements started getting implemented was building responsiveness in formulas. And of course, that's more advanced, but it can be done. So I'll go back on the arrow here so I can see my PowerApp. And look at that. That's okay. So I made it my own app, but check that out. Now it's saying make own app. Look at that. So there's a little quirkiness here in the interface. I did make it my own app already, but because I clicked on that, now I'm noticing a few things here, guys. But if I made it my own, I still have another step I have to do. So I clicked to make it my own. I prompted I want it to be OneDrive for Business. So I'm going to go ahead and click Done. Now it's going to reopen it, my actual app. That's a little quirky. Did you see that, Reed? That looks quirky to me, but come on, load.
I will say, I thought this was much harder and much more complex and everything than this interface now shows me it is.
Oh yeah, it used to be a lot more complex. Now, like I said, I noticed little quirky things here and there, but that's just kind of the way it is. But you're right, this interface is way easier than it was in the very beginning. And I'm just going to go on with slides while we're waiting for that. So what you have, you're going to have card controls. You're going to have fields that you can choose that you want to hide or show. And my apologies, the screenshot is actually older. And that'll show you when I started working with PowerApps. But the concept is still the same. I can have a control, and your options for your controls are going to change based upon the field type. So no matter what your data source is, whether it's SharePoint or SQL, you still have your data types. You know, date field. In this case, I've got a toggle button here for yes, no. And I have drop downs for choice columns, and then I have my calendar icons for date time fields. So you do have these different fields, and when your fields get added, now you can add and remove, you can reorder columns, and you could change the formatting. Your formatting options are going to change based upon the type of data card you're working with. So that's going to be dependent on the type of field you're working with. Now let's see if we got it. Okay, here we go. So this has got, my app is now created. In this case, you're going to see I have screens. I have different screens that are part of this app. Okay, I've got my home screen. My home screen is the main screen. It's a landing, the main screen that the user goes to when they first are going to open my app. Then you're going to see I have different screens. I have a review screen, I have a detail screen, checkout, reserve, confirmation. So I have these different screens, and then I'm going to expand the screen, and if I expand it, you're going to see I have different controls. Now you also have your ribbon up at the top. Now the ribbon has gone through a lot of changes. Another thing that I like is your PowerApp auto saves. When I first started working with PowerApps, it did not auto save, and the browser would time out. So I ended up having to get in the habit, which I think I still am, just because I came from the very beginning, was that I would work on my PowerApp, I'd get a phone call, deal with the phone call, come back and realize my PowerApp timed out. And all the changes I did from that last save to when it timed out, I lost. But thankfully, that is not the case anymore. But you guys will see in the very beginning, I kind of dealt with some frustrations. But I'm going to go ahead and preview the app. And there's two ways you can preview your app. I think it's the control key, or is it Alt? No, it's Alt. Okay. You can hold down the Alt key in your PowerApp, and by doing that, this is going to allow you to navigate in your PowerApp without actually having to hit play. But the other option I have is to click the play icon or click on F5. So I'll click on play, and now you're going to see I have a preview of my PowerApp. So here's my PowerApp. I can go ahead and click on an item. If I click on an item, this is actually taking me to a different screen. So this is displaying details about the item, that if I want to go back, I'll click the back button. Now you have different cards. Go back. So let's just go, let's say I have a text box up here. I can click on the controls here. I can also decide to click on elements in here in my canvas. So on the left is going to be your, I even forgot what this is called. This is your tree view pane here. Then you have your canvas area here. The right side is your properties panel. On the top, you have your ribbon. You're going to have different options on here. The default is home. And when I'm on home, I do have the capability to add new screens. And if I want to add different screens, I'm very happy with the things that the product group has added in here, because originally you only had very few options, blank, scrollable, and I believe gallery, or now that it's called list, but you were very limited. But now you have more options here, which is great. So I could decide, they even have a calendar one here, which I haven't tried that one yet. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's say I want to create a new screen. I could decide to start from blank or scrollable, or I'm going to go ahead and just click on the calendar here. So I'm going to click on calendar. And when I click on calendar, it's going to add my screen. And then based on that template I chose, I have this screen. Now, one of the things that's not going to happen, you'll notice if I go back into my PowerApp, I have, it's using an orange color here. But when you go and create new screens, what's going to happen is it's going to default to blue. Those are the colors that have been around. This is the colors that have been around from the very beginning of PowerApps. So then I'm going to have to go in and decide to change the colors that I want, but this is the default. So I would end up, changing this. But what I'm doing is I have my different controls here. So I have my screen, and my screen is screen 1, but I'll go ahead and change the name of this. And there's, let me move my little bar here. Here we go. So let's say I want to change the name. I'll just go ahead and rename this and call this, calendar screen. So I'm renaming my screen, and then you'll see I have different controls in my screen. And I can click on these and see which elements they are. Now, depending upon what I select, you're going to see the right side panel change. So then I'm going to have a gallery control. So let's just go ahead and click on a new item here. So there we go. So you actually see. So I've got a month day gallery control here. This gallery control has some other controls in it. And then if I go to the right, you're going to see I have a properties pane. And then I'm going to click on my different elements in here. So if I click on this element here, that is a subcircle. Let's go on title. So so here you see the circle where it's 20. That's actually so what's happening is it's highlighting at the top here because that's just showing you where the element is. But based on which date it is, today's the 20th, the circle's actually showing up behind today's date. But there's different controls here for that. But then let's say I want to change the text. So if I click on here, it says title 2. Now I'm not even going to get into it, but there's you'll notice you have title 2, circle 1, things like that. These are the naming conventions and ways it was auto-generated based on this app. What I have noticed is that newer apps that Microsoft has been releasing they've been getting cleaner and cleaner with the naming. Now you can go in and name this. Being an old school developer, I'm a stickler on naming conventions. But one of the things I learned with PowerApps is when I would create my PowerApp, in the beginning, I would go and I would rename everything to exactly the way I wanted it, have some naming convention. But as I'm developing the PowerApp, I noticed I would have to remove something or re-add it, or the customer changes the requirements. And all that work I put into renaming is gone. Or I delete a control, re-add by accident, re-add it, and then it goes back to the original. It just becomes a default name. So what I do now is I just ignore all of that for now. I get my PowerApp exactly the way I want it. I build the controls, I build all the stuff, and then I go back and start renaming things. And then I may get to the point where I just let it go. So that's all going to be up to you guys. But like I said, right now I just wouldn't be a stickler on that. But let's say here I've got my title selected, and because I have this as a text field, I have options here for the font. I also have options for the font size. Well, a lot of the things that you're going to see built into the template is that it has a lot of formulas. And let's say I want to go ahead and change the font. Right now it's Open Sans. Maybe I want to make it Lato Black, just so you can see the obvious change. So what I'm doing now is I'm changing the properties of my control. So what I like here is you have this great UI that if you're familiar and comfortable with working in Word and Excel, this should be fairly easy for you to pick up. Then what you're going to see is I have a formula bar here. Now the formula bar is like an Excel formula bar. What you're going to have here though is you're going to have properties you can click in the drop down. Then you're going to have functions, a function key here, and then you're going to have the actual bar here where you can input your formulas. Depending upon what control you have currently selected will vary on what options you have available in this drop down. So in this case, I have a text field selected, so you see I have a lot of options here in my drop down. Well, some of these options here, I did hate when I do that. Let's click on here again. So I click here, I'm on size. If I want to change the font size, you'll notice on the right-hand side here, there's actually, I can't just click in there right now and hard code a value. I can't hard code a value in there right now because there was a formula that was automatically applied to this font size. But I can overwrite that, and to overwrite it, I can just click here, and then what happens is, it's already on size here. Let's just pretend I'm somewhere else and do it, and I'll do it again. So if I clicked on the function icon right there, you're going to see it takes me to my size property. So what you will find is a lot of the properties that are in this formula, well, all the properties, not all, sorry, all the properties here that are on the right-hand side are also accessible up here in the formula bar. I go to text or width. I should have width. I've got auto align here. I've got line height here, visible, padding, vertical align. I could decide to wrap, so I have different options. Now let me click on this actual gallery card. Now if I click on the gallery card, you're going to see my options change. I'm going to go back to the home screen. If I go back to the home screen, right now I have my screen selected. So all I have here now is properties based on the actual screen. So like I mentioned, your properties are going to change based upon where you are at. Then let's go with the search button here. So I have a search button here Then I also have a filter icon. Well, I want to do something when I click on something here. So what's going to happen is you'll have actionable controls you can, or actionable formulas that you can do. Now I kind of picked a more complex one. So let's go to another demo I have. So I have a customer who is brand new to SharePoint, and I built them an intranet in SharePoint Online. Now I did this a little while back, so this customer did not want to go fully modern. So the site that I'm going to pull up is actually classic, but it has modern list and libraries enabled. But what I did was I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to leverage PowerApps for them and SharePoint. So what I did was I took this form that they have, and I digitized it for them. And what you're going to see is in this form, this is IT replacement requisition form. Let's go to another one. Let's new hire hardware. So let's say someone gets hired into the company, and then they need to fill out a hardware requisition form. And what it is they have specific hardware packages that the user can choose, and then also various options they can choose from, different add-ons. And then, so what I did was I decided to leverage PowerApps. And one of the first things I did, I have their SharePoint site, and like I said, you can use various data sources. For this customer, it made sense just to use SharePoint. So what I have is I have SharePoint as their data storage. I have SharePoint as their, they're coming in here to do their work, and then I created a PowerApp custom view. So I'm not using a standalone Canvas app. I'm using a PowerApp custom view against a SharePoint list. So the first thing I did was I have hardware packages. So I created a list called hardware packages, and let's just go ahead and go to the settings of this list. I'm going to attempt to go to the settings. Okay, there we go. So I'm in the settings in this list, and you'll and what you're going to see here. Oh, come on, there we go. I have just a few columns, and the default title column. I have a package so they can choose which package it is, because I had predefined based upon the form that they gave me what package types they were going to have. So package A through E. So I made a choice column. I'll go back. Then I have specs. I decided I wanted to make it, I wanted them to be able to control some of the layout within the specs. So I made this multiple lines of text, and then I have a total, which is currency. So I'll go to hardware packages so you can see the data. So I've got hardware packages here. Let me go ahead and click on one to see the details. So what it is I have a list for them to easily maintain, to go in and add hardware packages or modify these existing hardware packages. So they can go in here and modify the package and determine what the changes are. There we go. So they have hardware packages. And what I wanted to do, so I did this. I didn't want to have this hard-coded in the PowerApp. What I wanted was to allow them to have a list that they can maintain that has the list of hardware packages in it that's going to be used by the PowerApp. So I have this list to contain that data. Then if I go back to site contents, and they made me get rid of the site contents in the left. Okay, so if I go back to site contents, I have another list, IT new hire hardware requests. Now this is all, like I said, they have not launched any of this. It was something I started with them, but other priorities got put in place. So I'm waiting for them to just tell me they want me to get back to this. So this is still kind of a work in progress. But what it is I have this list here that I created to actually be the actual data of the request that's going to hold this data. So what I did was, instead of creating an app, if I create an app here, it's going to create a standalone PowerApp. But what I did was I used customized forms because I wanted a PowerApp custom form for the new edit and display. I'll click on customize form, and it's going to take me to the PowerApp that I created for this SharePoint list. Now this app isn't perfect, like I mentioned, it's a work in progress. And my interface, like I said, I started this a while back. Now I use this one for demos, so you're going to see some changes. And a couple things on here that I want to make note real quickly is they're still working on their infrastructure. So originally I would actually pull the current user and then have it populate their manager or something like that, or have a people picker. But they did not want me to be that advanced. So they said, Christina, just put hard, text fields right now. So that's what I did. But I would definitely change that. But here is my form. And I have, in my form, you're going to see I have a couple screens. Now I have form screen. Let's go ahead and rename this. I'll just call it main screen or home screen. So I'll call this home screen, and you'll see I have different elements on here. And let me duplicate my form just to show you something. Patience. I have to have patience. There we go. So I duplicated my form, and of course home screen, made a copy, and now it's home screen _1. But I only want to do this because I want to show you how it started. Here's delete. Okay, there's my SharePoint form. Let's just delete all this. So originally when this started, I guess I can control click, there we go. All right, so when this originally started, what it was something more like this, where I just had, my gallery control, I have my SharePoint form because it gets a SharePoint list, and I have my controls. But you see that I wanted my UI to be a little bit different. I wanted to have elements for them to choose here, and then I wanted to have the hardware package here that they selected. Now in my PowerApp, I have it defaulting to package A, but then the user has the option to actually click to change the package. So if I click change package, you're going to notice it goes to another screen that has some, I still need to fix some formatting, but it takes you to another screen that lists all the hardware packages. And these hardware packages are actually pulling out of this SharePoint list here called hardware packages. So it's pulling this data here. So I made that dynamic. Close some of the, there we go. So if I click on, I'll expand my package screen, and you'll see down here below, whoops, go here. I've got a gallery control. Then I also have, a header and some text and so on. So if I click on the header here, I have that. Now, another thing to make note of, with Canvas-driven apps, there's no way for you to actually have a header that's going to just populate in all your forms. So what you do is I end up creating a header, and you can group items. So you can actually, now I have this grouped already, but I can have items here, and that's, I'll control click and then group. So what I do is I add my elements that I want for my header, and then I do a whole control click. Was it shift click or control click? There, shift click. I did shift click to multi-select, and then I could right click and group. So I right clicked and grouped to actually create a header. And so then what I do after that is I can take my header and I can copy that, and then I'll go to my other screen and paste the header. So that, and then your header is not going to be in exactly the position you want, so you're going to have to reposition it. But that's how I get my header elements in between my screens. Then I have a gallery control here. Now let me just create a blank screen, or I'll do a gallery, blank one here. So originally, when I was creating this package screen, the way it started out was this way, where I created a screen. When I created it, I chose list, and when I chose list, it created my gallery control here. Now this gallery control, you would end up changing, right now there's no data source selected, but I could change my data source. And so if I go to, and I can't show you everything because I'm running out of time, but if I click on here, this data source is actually using my hardware packages list. So you have data sources for your Power Apps. And to access those data sources, I'm going to click on the View tab here and then go to Data Sources. And when I click on Data Sources, you're going to see all the data sources that are available in my form. When I first started out, let me just cross this out right here. When I first started out in the SharePoint list and clicked on Customize Forms in the very beginning, What happened was it created the data connection. It created the Canvas app and also created the data connection here for this, and that is my actual SharePoint list name. Then what I did was, since I wanted hardware packages, I needed to add that data source into this PowerApp. So what I did was I clicked on here to add a new data source, and then it already has my SharePoint connector because I've already connected to SharePoint list. But you'll see you have other options here, and of course one of them is importing from Excel. And then I'll click on SharePoint. And when I click on SharePoint, here's all the different site collections I have available, and I can choose the data. So that's how I brought in that second data source. And I have some PowerApps where I have 5 data sources or more. But so I have my data source. And then when you have your data source, you have your layout. You also have your fields. Well, if I click on fields, you're going to see this one's more advanced. Let's go to my other one here where I really don't have much stuff yet. And if I click on, so now I'm back to my simple screen that I started to create. And when I click on it, and I know I'm running out of time here, you can map that. So if I go here, the way that I got this data to show, if I click on edit, I started to build, let's go to text. I have a specs field, and what it is I did a multi-text field, and so this is actually pulling specs. Now let me go back to my hardware packages here. There's a specs field, and then I also have hardware costs. So I just map it to the different fields that I have that I want to display. Then if I go back to my PowerApp, this one here, okay, here we go. Go back to my PowerApp, they would select one, and let's go towards the button. If I click on the button, I want to on select, there's an on select value here. What I'm doing is I'm actually going to navigate to the other screen. So they'll say, okay, you know what, I'm going to choose select customer service, which is package C, and when I click on that, you'll notice this updates, and it's showing the new package that they chose. Now there's another thing, I've got these toggles here, and this is yes, these are yes, no, or Boolean fields, and I've had a lot of customers decide that instead of it being a toggle, they wanted to have an actual yes, no. So let me just change Google Earth. So I'll click on Google Earth, I clicked on field, and if I click the type that I want, by default it's a toggle, but if I want it to be a yes, no option, I'm going to click on edit options here. And when I click on edit options, I'm going to need to resize. Now you're going to see that it changed from a toggle button to a yes, no. It also set the formula to, the layout is, let me go to the layout option here, hold on. Need to select control. The layout is vertical, but if I want it to be horizontal, I'm just going to change the property here to horizontal, and I need to expand it. So you'll see you can modify your controls, and maybe I want Google Earth to be before Foundation. So what I can do is I can move it up, and you'll see it reorders. Any questions? So this, yeah, I'm running out of time. So, but what you have is your cards.
You're good, by the way. If you need to go a little bit over, people can drop off if they want. But
fantastic, because I'm totally going to go over. Okay, so you have your cards, and there's advanced properties that you can also modify on the cards. And right now I don't see, well, that one's locked down. If I just go back to here and I have display mode edit, or default here, no, you're going to see that I have a lock icon. And this lock icon is a property that is in a more advanced property. So if I click on an option that is advanced, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to unlock the card. And if you unlock the card, then that will make these things release so you can make changes to it. So if I click unlock to change properties, now you see I have all these different properties available, such as items. Maybe instead of yes, no, I want it to be happy, sad. Still a Boolean value, but I'm changing those options. And you'll see that it's nice because I'm doing it straight here in the UI. Yes, PowerApps can get a little complex. Actually, correction, it can get very complex, especially with what you're trying to do. But you'll notice I'm not actually in Visual Studio. I'm not having to write code. Yes, I do love to code, But in this, I don't have to write code. So I've met people, even Paul Colmsey's daughter, she taught herself PowerApps at 17 and now she's teaching PowerApps. So anybody can learn this, in my opinion. Now, some people choose it's not for them. I love it. I think it's very powerful and there's a lot you can do. Now, a big chunk of the time you're going to spend is actually working on the formatting in your cards. That's why I'm finding, 95% is spent on this here. Yes, I'm also accounting for the formulas and things like that. But that's where you're going to spend a lot of time. However, it actually is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So you have your formula bar, and your formula bar is similar to Excel formulas. If you're comfortable with working with Excel, you should be able to, it might be easier for you to pick up building PowerApps formulas. So building PowerApps formulas is similar to Excel, but what you're doing is you're configuring controls instead of actual cells. In Excel, you're doing cells. And then you're building formulas that applies to your specific app instead of applying to a spreadsheet. So working with the formula bar, what you have is your property list, which is what I started changing, property values. Then you have your formula, and you have your formula bar. Now you can do anything from simple calculations to more complex. I end up putting things in there where I'm saying, putting some logic to where based upon an item they select is going to determine what it's going to do. And so you'll see too, if I might update text will end up having quotation on it to let it know it's a string. If you make a mistake, let's say I start typing text up somewhere up here, I wipe it out, and I don't have the double quotes, PowerApps is pretty good with giving you your error messages and letting you know what's wrong. So you have, you'll have that check. Now navigating, I like to navigate, I'll build different navigation controls within my PowerApps. And this is where, when I started out, I started with some of the template PowerApps because I wanted to see how the navigation was built. And the way I did that was building that, working with the template apps and then clicking on the different elements and just looking at the properties of those elements in those pre-built templates to see what it was doing. And then that's basically how I taught myself. So in this case, you'll have an on select property that you can change. And in this case, on select, I want to navigate, and you choose your screen, and then there's a transition type. And so that's how you build that. Now, as you saw, the demo that I'm showing you is one where I customize a SharePoint list form. And the way that works is the form becomes embedded in the SharePoint list, just like InfoPath custom forms did. And you open that form from the SharePoint list that it's created. It's not going to be a standalone app where you can actually have it running on your phone. But I've also had customers where they wanted it pre-built into the SharePoint list, and then I built a separate Power App for them as a standalone. But you do have different options. And features on that, you saw that I connected to various data sources. I have a more complex Power App I wrote, which I can't access at the moment because the project ended, so I'm rebuilding it as a demo. But I had it where it's against a SharePoint list, but I'm also pulling Azure SQL data and then pulling and writing back to Dynamics. So you can go from very simple to extremely complex. Okay, so here's another example where I have it built. Oh yeah, let's show you this. So I'll go back here into my actual list. And if I click on a new item, here's my Power App. Now you saw that I made some changes, but I didn't publish the changes. So what's going to happen is the user is only going to see the latest published version of my Power App. But this is what the Power App looks like in the SharePoint list. So instead of, what I could do is, let me go ahead and turn it off. So I'm going to go to the list settings. Come on. And you have the setting, the same setting you had in the past. You have form settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on form settings. And when you're building a Power App against a Power App custom view, originally you only had two options. You had one that was created against an InfoPath form, and the other one that was just use the default SharePoint form. Now, because this is because I have a custom list here, and I've already tied it to my PowerApp, you're going to see that this PowerApp option is chosen here. So you will notice it does require to have the new list experience, which is true. So if you are on classic SharePoint and SharePoint Online, or you turned off the modern features, you would not have this available. So let's just go ahead and I'll make this default back to the SharePoint form. I'll click OK. And I defaulted it back to the SharePoint form. So if I go back to my list and click to create a new item, you're going to see it's defaulting back to the SharePoint form, the original SharePoint form. But then if I wanted that back to as the PowerApp, I can click Customize with PowerApp and republish, or I'll go back to the list settings for this list. Go back to form settings. And then I'm going to change this back to use my custom here. Now, if I had the SharePoint form, let's say they just say, you know what, Christina, forget the PowerApp, just completely get rid of it. I could delete the custom form, but I don't do that unless I really want to get rid of it, because I've also had customers come back and change their mind. So I could decide to turn it off for them, and then they come back later and say, okay, let's go ahead and implement your PowerApp. So I'll go back to making that default to the PowerApp. Oh, okay, yeah, this is good to know. Now it's telling me I have to publish my form again within the PowerApps to make this option work. So I did choose it, but before it used to not, I didn't think it gave me that message before, but because it was published originally. But I'm just gonna go ahead and click OK. So what I need to do is I actually need to reopen the PowerApp, which actually I do still have it here. I'm gonna go ahead and save. Publish to SharePoint, publish. And since I'm publishing it, I did change that option that you saw where I had the message letting me know that I have to republish it from PowerApps. But if, let's say, I still had this, if I had the SharePoint form, the default form selected, and I went and republished this, the publishing is going to reset that value and put it back to using the PowerApp. Okay. Let's go back here. You know what? Let's just do this. Okay, so click here. Another thing I've noticed when I'm working with PowerApp custom views is that I might publish a change, but it might not pick up my change right away, or the browser is doing some caching. But in this case, it did. It picked up my updates, and of course, I need to fix some formatting here. But I published it, and so you see that it's going back to using my PowerApp. So I talked about size and orientation. No, that was the thing here. So when you're working with the PowerApps custom view, one of the things you cannot do is set some of the settings. If I go to app settings, you're going to notice that app name and icon is grayed out. And the reason that's grayed out is because that is only applicable to standalone Power Apps. And because this is a PowerApp custom view, the only options that I can change are these two here. So really the screen size and orientation. So this is dependent upon, like I said, what type of PowerApp you are building. So I've got my screen size. This is where, okay, standalone PowerApps, I did mention earlier on the webinar that I said it wouldn't make sure you have the orientation size. Where it's really most important is building it here against the SharePoint list. If you're doing a PowerApp custom view, this is where I might have started out small, decided to go large, and it just, I had to redo a lot of the formatting. So I don't think it's as devastating as a standalone as it is with working with the PowerApp custom view. So important, make sure when you're working with it in the very beginning that you determine the size before you start really working on your controls. That's my advice. And then I showed you this screen, which is where you can change it. And that's it. I could show you so much more, but that was, this was to give you a little demo, quick demo on PowerApps and what you can do with it. Let me just go ahead and update there. If you have any questions, you can feel free to send me an email, and anything else, Ree?
No, I think we're really, really good. So I picked two winners, Teresa Buchanan, because she asked a great question, and Todd Thomason, because he was the first one to log in and he's been here the whole time. So you expect a reach out from Past Summit about a gift card. So let me.
I hope that this webinar was informative and helpful for you and gave you a little, taste of what PowerApps can do.
So I really, really appreciate you doing this today. I will have this video uploaded to YouTube later today. I'll follow up linking in a tweet, and I'll provide some links for you that you can use for your MVP profile.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks a
and
lot.
Congrats on the new job, by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.